Hello, and welcome to Crafting with Kafey, my new channel where I make stuff out of stuff from stuff that I like. For my first video, I wanted to craft something to celebrate the release of The Last of Us Season 2. Just can't wait to see Joel and Ellie living out their best lives together.
Just before you put it on me, I just want to say I'm innocent. And I'm hungover.
Nice approach!
No spoilers, please. Anyway, I was in the charity shop recently and I found these two familiar faces, and I had what I'm sure you'll agree was the only logical idea. Okay, now I've got these guys, it's time to start sketching and figuring out what I'm going to do. My initial idea is that Buzz would look hilarious as a clicker, but I want to add a little more to it than that, so I'm also going to make Woody into Joel and set up a scene as though Buzz has just jumped out in front of him. They're also going to want a base to stand on, and I'm thinking about this particular scene in the first game in the hotel basement. If you know, you know. But yeah, I'm just sketching out the basic sizes and scales. I also think it'd be more dramatic if Joel has been knocked on his butt, and after a few more measurements, which I'll probably ignore later, I think I'm about ready to get started. So, the first job on the list is to cut Buzz's face off. There's so many tools you could use for a job like that, but in the end I think I'm just going to use this rotary tool that I got on Amazon. Yeah. So, the clickers have this really distinctive facial structure. It's kind of like in Terminator 2 where the bad guy gets shot in the face, but it's also kind of like a mushroom stroganoff. Enjoy. After a few quick cuts, Buzz's face should lift right off, and then I just need to tidy up a little bit with a craft knife and we're ready to move on. Next I'm going to glue all the joints in place to make sure things don't move around. And when you're doing this, it's very important to absolutely flood his butt with glue. And make sure to get some on your fingers too for that crispy exoskeleton.
Wonderful.
Speaking of fingers, I want to flare his out a bit more to give him more of a poised look. Think Ryan Gosling in La La Land. He's also looking pretty pristine for a zombie spaceman, so I'm just going to give him an overall good dose of abuse. Then it's a quick sand all over to help the paint stick later on, and I've just noticed he's actually missing his visor, so I'm going to have a look in my box of tricks, see if I can find anything. It could take a while, there's a lot of... Oh! Actually, yeah, that's pretty perfect. Will it fit? Ah, yes. So now I just need to saw it into shape and then do some snips to make it look like broken glass. Ooh. Wow. Okay. Nice. So after a quick roughen up, that's ready to glue into place. Next on the to-do list is to start adding some fungal flourishes. Because the shapes are so organic, I think the best thing to do is to sculpt these by hand. I'm going to be using a mixture of milliput and green stuff, which I've heard really good things about. The only problem is this stuff is very sticky, so I'm going to be wetting my hands and my tools and everything to try and negate that. And I'm also going to try using these bottle lids I've been keeping hold of. They've got a really nice texture on them that should give the look of those lines you get on the underside of a mushroom. Then after peeling it off and shaping it, I just have to smooth it onto the back of Buzz's head. As you saw, it was sticking pretty badly to the glass, so this time I'm going to try with some baking paper, see if that works better. And yeah, that is much better. So now I'm happy with the method, it's just a case of rinse and repeat. I'm going to keep making pieces and adding them to build up the head. And I'm also going to add some pieces on his neck and gaps between the armour, anywhere that makes sense for a fungus to burst through. Next I'm going to add these little tendril things that you see on the designs of the clickers. I'm sure there's an official name for things like this in the YouTube crafting community. No, can't remember. Anyway, I'm going to use some of this craft wire to make some of the finer details. This will help me get a bit more specific when I'm making things like these teeny tiny adorable little mushrooms, which I'm just going to stick on here and there just to give him a bit of extra visual interest. And then finally I'm just going to stick on the tendrils, a few extra funguses, And with that, I'd say he's pretty much good to go. Okay, now we've got Buzz sorted, I think it's time to talk about that base. It's all about that base, about that...
Shut it, please.
Actually, let's not do that. For the back wall, I'm going to use some foam board. I'm going to be scoring in a brick texture later, and I think it could work really well for that. So all I need to do is mark out where the door's going to go, and then design a brick pattern to go around it. Perfect. Now this stuff's got a pretty nasty backing on it, which is just going to get in the way later, so I need to figure out how to get it off. Maybe by applying some heat, that'll help. Nope. How about some water? That should loosen it up. Yeah, still not much better. Oh well, future me can figure that out. So now I'm just going to score in the brick texture I drew earlier, and then with a bit more water and heat, hopefully that'll start to come off. And I'm pleased to share that was way more horrible than it looked. So now I just need to cut out the door and do the same thing on the back wall. Done. Next I'm just going to add a bit of weathering, and then it's time to start working on the door. I'm going to keep things fairly simple. I'm planning on just lining the door frame with some thin slices of card. And there's also some extra details I want to add, like a security light and an exit sign that are just above the door, which I'm going to make from some foam offcuts. For the security light glass, I'm going to use this cool textured plastic. It came from a Tesco meal deal samosa, for those who want to know. Now I'm happy with the shape, I'm just going to make a simple box out of some black card for that, and I'm going to do the same for the exit sign too. Next up, I'm going to make a wet floor sign out of some cardboard, which turns out to be a much more complicated task than you might imagine. But after some measuring, cutting, remeasuring and recutting, we get there in the end. I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so how are we doing? We've got the two walls, a wet floor sign, next we need the door. And for the door I'm just going to use some simple card glued on behind the wall. And then I'm going to need the door handle, which I'm making out of a little chunk of card, drilling some holes, and then I'm going to add the door handle using a little bit more of that armature wire from earlier on. The wire is round, so I'm just going to squish it flat using some pliers, and that'll help it look a little bit more like a door handle. Then it's just a case of gluing it in place. I think it's time to start putting this together, so I'm going to glue down the floor, the door, the walls, and all the little bits and bobs I've made so far. I've also just noticed we're missing the infamous card reader, so I'm going to quickly make that out of some cardboard by cutting a slot in it and then gluing on 2 of these minuscule beads. Now that's finished, just putting those in place, giving it a quick trim, and I'd say that's the base pretty much done. Okay Woody, it's time to Joelify you. So first things first, we want to put him through some extreme personal trauma, and then follow that with 20 years or so of grief and soul-eroding survival methods. Once you're happy with that look, glue his joints in place, and then we can start sketching what we want to add to him. When I think about Joel, the things that spring to mind are the green shirt, the beard, the watch, the weapons, and of course his backpack. I'm going to make it out of these foam sheets from Hobbycraft. They're flexible and they've got a little bit of texture, so they make a great stand-in for leather. So after eyeballing the net, I've made some cuts and glued it together. You've got the basic structure of the bag. Next it's time to start adding some more details, things like the top flap, the side pockets, which I'm just using some flat pieces of foam for. Then there's the front pocket as well, and you've got the loops on the top and the sides where he hangs his weapons from. Now I could stop there, but where's the fun in that? So I'm going to get extra fiddly and make the straps and the buckles out of tiny little pieces, put some little holes in, and then glue them in place too. I think I'm happy to call that done, so now it's just a case of roughing it up a little bit and I can move on. Oh wait, no I can't, I haven't done the straps. So for the straps I'm going to cut out some little pieces of foam, and then for the canvas details I'm using some strips of paper which I'm coating in super glue to give a bit more rigidity to, and then adding some little strap details on top of those too. Hanging from one of those straps is Joel's torch. For the torch, again, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I just need to find a little hollow cylinder. This cap from a cat flea treatment bottle. Ah, that's a tongue twister. Will make the perfect top, and then it was just a bit of cocktail stick for the handle. Next up, I'm going to make his pipe weapon. which is just a simple piece of pipe with some scissor pieces tied to the top. For that I'm using some gardening wire, some strips of foam for the details, and then for the blades themselves I'm just going to use some more of that modelling wire we used earlier, but this time I'm going to flatten them out and sharpen them, and then tie them into place with some elastic band to look like rope or string or whatever it is Joel's supposed to have used. Next up, it's the arrows. For this I'm just using some cocktail sticks and then making the fletching out of some more foam. Pretty simple, but it looks good. What's not going to be so simple is the pistol.
Time to go to work.
For the cylinder, I found this great looking piece inside of a brush pen, so I'm going to build everything on top of that. Next it's the barrel, which I think was just from a Chupa Chops lolly or something like that. Then the handle's made out of a broken ice tray, and the trigger guard is just a piece of wire. Okay, next up it's time for Joel's watch. For the outside I'm choosing a little piece of plastic, the crown's a slice of wire, and for the strap I'm just using a little bit more of that foam. Now jumping back to the gun, I'm going to use some of this pill wrapper for some texture for the handle, and with that done, I think it's time to start putting on Joel's accessories.
I think it is absolutely perfect on you.
Okay, next up, it's beard time. I'm starting off with a bit of an Abe Lincoln vibe. He does actually look a bit like Abe Lincoln, doesn't he, Woody? Anyway, so I'm just building up the main structure first, adding a furrowed brow, and then I'm adding some detail and refining it with this sculpting tool and this scalpel. For Joel's hair, it's just some messy chunks really. He doesn't have a particular hairstyle, does he? And then I'm just cutting into that with the sculpting tool before adding his scar on his nose. Now I'm going to make him some trousers out of fabric. The fabric in question is pre-worn Primark underwear, I believe. I don't feel like sewing, so I'm just going to super glue it roughly into place and sort of wing it. Just poking things into the general shape of some trousers. Of course he needs his turn-ups because, you know, Joel's a hipster really, isn't he?
I really miss coffee.
And once that's done, it's just a quick tidy up, and then I'm going to add a little bit of damage here and there, just to keep in line with Joel's thrifty aesthetic. And finally, it's just adding some green stuff to smooth out any remaining gaps, add fingers on top of the gun barrel, I wanted to add some rolled up sleeves, and just generally doing the finishing touches. Now for the part I've been looking forward to and dreading in equal measure, we're going to add some fungus to the base. I've had in my mind that expanding foam would approximate the look of it really well. I'm just doing a quick test though on some spare card because I don't want to mess up all my work. I can already see though this is looking pretty much perfect, so I'm happy to move on to the real thing. I've got Buzz in for scale, and obviously I need to be really careful because I've spent a long time making.
Oh no.
Yeah, so after some quick repair work to Buzz's smashed up face, I'm back to sculpting. I'm just dragging some of this around while it's still wet, and for the more refined details I'm using a hot glue gun to make the tendrils and creepers that spread out from the main bulk of the fungus. This made me think it might be nice to add some to Buzz to make him integrate into the background a little bit better. And then it's time for a detail that literally no one except for me will care about. It's the security card. I've probably inhaled enough expanding foam fumes now, so I'm going to move on to adding some more of these little florets, just to tie it in with Buzz and finish the look. And that's it. I think I've sculpted all the main parts, so it's time to move on to painting. Now it's time to add some colour. The colour palette in The Last of Us is an interesting mix. There's a lot of decaying muted tones, but also surprising splashes of bright colour, so I'm going to be looking at a lot of reference material along the way. I actually paint professionally, so I'm hoping this is going to go well, but it's my first time using an airbrush, so that'll be interesting. First I'm just blocking in the main colours. There's the muted blue on the floor, and then the walls I'm using a bone white. And then I'm using this rusty brown colour all around the funguses, around the main features to look like water stains or something like that. And for the fungus, I'm starting with this sickly yellow tone and then building up different colours to make it look as organic and alive as possible. And then it's just the wet floor sign, which I think was remarkably considerate of Buzz considering the state that he's in. For Buzz, I started with the zenithal highlight, which I did off camera, and then I'm blocking in the main colours with thin light coats to try and retain as much of that highlight as I can. I'm struggling with the finer details with the airbrush, so I'm moving on to hand painting now, and my goal is just to get a first coat on everything. You may have noticed an uptick in the quality. Just to mention, it was at this point that I bought a camera, so hopefully future episodes should look a bit better. So anyway, I'm just blocking in the fleshy tones here, doing the final details on Buzz, and then I'm ready to move on to Joel. To help the models feel unified, I'm going to use the same colours as often as I can. So I'm using the green from Buzz's armour for Joel's shirt, then I'm spraying on a muted dark blue for Joel's jeans, a pale skin tone, and then some warm brown for the leather details. What's this? Graffiti? We'll soon get rid of that. While those two are drying off, I'm moving back over to the base for a moment, just painting in the tendrils and also giving it a general dry brush just to pick out some of the details. Next I'm adding some pinks and yellows to the fleshy areas, and then I'm painting in Joel's hair, beard, gun and other details. I don't much fancy trying to paint Buzz's decals, so I'm just finding some online and printing them off, and then I'm going to stick them in place. I'm doing the same for the exit sign, then I've just got to paint in the little buttons on the card reader, and then it's just the unfeeling black abyss of Joel's eyes. Now I don't want to completely lose Woody, so I'm adding in a few things like his cowskin waistcoat and his sheriff's star, which I'm using a gold metallic paint for, and then a silver metallic paint for things like the blades, the door handle and any other metal details dotted around. Next I'm going to do the security card, which again no one will notice, but I will. I'm not going to try and do the face though because it's pretty tiny. Speaking of tiny, the watch is bothering me, so I've decided I want to put some glass in there. After some quick measurements, I'm just going to cut out a little piece of this plastic and try and replicate what I'm seeing on the reference images.
Your watch is broken.
Next, I'm going to use some UV resin to add a bulb to Joel's torch. Make sure you follow the safety instructions. And I'm also going to add some to his eyes just to help him feel a little bit more alive. Next, it's time to attach Buzz's visor, but at the moment it's not quite fitting, so I'm going to trim that down to size. And then I think it's time to start doing some oil washes. Again, I've never done this before, so I'm quite excited to see how it works. I'm just choosing a few colours that I think will work well with the tones I've already laid down. And I'm using a mixture of cool and warm colours so that I can push and pull light and make it feel a bit more dynamic. I've mixed it with some white spirit so it's very thin, and as you paint over, it just falls into all the little gaps and crevices, helps to pick out more details and give a sense of light and shadow. It's also really great for weathering and making things feel a bit dirtier, which is obviously what we want on this project. The other thing that's great about oil washes is you can use some white spirit on a tissue and wipe off any excess at the end. Next up, it's time for a dry brush. For those who don't know, dry brushing is where you get a little bit of paint on your brush, wipe as much off as possible, and then you just gently feather it across everything. It helps to pick up the highlights and again just adds another level of detail. I just want to pull back a little bit of the washes I did earlier, so here I'm using some white spirit on a sponge and just gently wiping across the larger surfaces. Same with Buzz and Joel, I'm just pulling back a little bit of what I did to get some more pure colour coming through. Then, using a sponge again, I'm just going to stipple on some browns and oranges to give the look of rust on the edge of armour panels, and also on any metal surfaces on the base. Finally, I'm just going to add some UV resin to Buzz's mouth to look like saliva. And then, because I'm scared of him falling on his face again, I'm just going to quickly drill out a hole for a dowel, put that through his foot, and that should keep him secure. And with that, we're done. Time for the beauty shots. And a song. I got the sips in me. I got the sips in me. I got this fungus growing in my brain, making me crazy, make me act insane. You know I'll never be the same again. Oh, I got the sips in me. Oh, I got the sips in me. Now the years go by, but I can never die. You know I never did like mushrooms much. Yeah, my body's turning into mush. Well, now I'll never be Jesse's crush. Oh, I got the steps in me. Oh, I got the steps in me. Oh, I got the steps in me. And that's it, the end of the video. I'd just like to formally apologise to Randy Newman and his legal team for that abysmal impression. I'd also like to thank you if you've made it this far into the video. Being a brand new channel, it really means a lot to me. If you enjoyed what you saw, please drop a like, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon, where you can join Kayfie's Craft Club, get behind the scenes content, previews of upcoming videos, and much, much more. Again, thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.